in FRA CFR Part 49, CFR 49 Part 215 and Appendix D. Briefly describe the differences between the Part 215 and the Appendix D railcar inspections in terms of what gets inspected and who is authorized to perform the inspections. Mr. Cox?
Yes, thank you. Under 215, the group of people called Carmen are authorized to do the safety inspections. They are a group of safety inspectors, and under Appendix D, the train crews can do the inspection. I actually have a printout of 215 here. I believe it's Exhibit E22 in your record. But this here represents 215, which the Carmen are extensively trained in. And out of that entire example, only this small section and the small section at the bottom of this page is what the train crews inspect. All in all, on a freight car, you're looking at anywhere from 90 to 105 points of inspection per side of a freight car, depending on what type of freight car we're talking about. Whereas the Appendix D only hits on 12 points. It is meant to be a very limited type of inspection to get the car to a safety inspection point. In addition to that, to outline the type of training that these safety inspectors have, these highly qualified inspectors, under 215, they are issued these wheel gauges. And they use these wheel gauges in order to assess the total health of the freight car, something that is never issued to a freight train crewman.
Is there a difference in the purpose of the two types of inspections?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, the 215 that the Carmen does is supposed to assess the total health of the freight car, whereas the Appendix D is just supposed to be a stopgap to get the freight car to an inspection point. Unfortunately, in today's rail structure, the railroads have gotten larger, there are less railroads, and there are less interchange points. Therefore, the Appendix D has become more and more the primary inspection on these cars instead of the detailed inspection under the 215 by the qualified mechanical inspector.
And what are the differences in the qualifications and what type of training is required to perform each type of inspection?
There is testing yearly on air brakes and mechanical defects, and the carmen are required by the federal regulation to go through this type of training very regularly. The train crews, not nearly as much.
If you could bring up the map, please. What type of inspections were performed on the first car to derail from when Norfolk Southern first received the car in Madison, Illinois, up to the train derailment in East Palestine?
My understanding of the record, when Norfolk and Southern first received the car, there was no inspection done. So the car came from another railroad, and traditionally there would be an interchange inspection and the cars would be looked at, but as I've said, there's less and less Class 1 carriers, and therefore they are relying more on the Appendix D. This car came into Decatur, Illinois, passed through Toledo, Ohio, where it stopped, Cleveland, Ohio, where it stopped, and passed through Bellvue, Ohio on their system. There are qualified mechanical inspectors at all these points, and they were not allowed to inspect this car at any of those locations.
Thank you. Regarding the types of rail car inspections in yards, what does the term ghost tracks refer to, and does it apply to Norfolk Southern trains and yards?
The term ghost track means a train that has been set outside of the terminal. It was never yarded. And with the train never being yarded, where they change out the crews, there is no qualified mechanical inspection that has to be performed in an instance, and therefore that can be used to skate the regulation and only do the Appendix D inspection and not the full inspection of a qualified inspector.
In September of 2022, the FRA administrator sent a letter to Class 1 railroads with specific concerns about the level and type of rail car inspections, including ghost tracks. The letter sent to the Norfolk Southern CEO is Exhibit E21. Mr. Cox, do you know if Norfolk Southern has addressed the FRA administrator's concerns regarding these rail car inspections?
To my knowledge, they have not responded to that letter. And to expand upon my knowledge of that letter, when the local representatives at various points across the NS system asked their transportation management about this letter and letting the carmen do the detailed inspections, their response was, this letter says I do not have to do this. Therefore, Norfolk and Southern is not going to do this.
Mr. Hopewell, has Norfolk Southern responded to the September 22 letter from the FRA administrator?
I'm not aware. I'm not aware of this letter or our status on a response to it. Sorry.
Can you find out for us, please?
I can.
Can I ask who here would be able to ask that question, answer that question?
I would have to consult with the rest of my colleagues who are here if someone's read in on that topic.
Thank you.
Mr. Cox, did a Norfolk Southern employee inspect the rail car from the time when Norfolk Southern received it up to the derailment in East Palestine, whether it be a carman inspection or a train crew inspection?
For clarity, you're talking about the car that burned off the journal?
Yes.
The answer is no.
Thank you. And this lack of the inspections, was this within the FRA regulations for car inspections?
Technically, yes.
To the best of my knowledge, as I've already outlined, due to the fact that there are less Class 1 carriers, they have used the regulation to skirt the inspection process. With there being less Class 1 carriers, the regulation is out of date and not in touch with today's railroad structure. And to further outline, I am also aware that there is a Railway Safety Act bill out there for vote, and in its current shape out of committee would fix a lot of these oversights. Thank you.
Thank you. And you alluded to this previously when the map was up, but just specifically, was there an opportunity for Norfolk Southern carmen to conduct a full mechanical inspection of the rail car prior to the derailment?
There are areas where I discussed that carmen were present, but no, they would not have been allowed to look at that car per the Norfolk and Southern's policies.
Thank you. And my final question for this round, Mr. Cox, do you believe that a full mechanical safety inspection or an alternate maintenance schedule would have detected a failed bearing in the first car that derailed in East Palestine?
Possibly. Mostly.
That is a potential. I would reference the exhibit in your docket, E1, where it shows pictures of multiple bearings, among them where the wheel seal is cocked and out of place. There's an inner and outer. And when that gets greasy, a carman will take this gauge and give a little pry to see if that seal will turn. If it does, that's loose and it will leak lubricants. It can fling lubricants across the side of the freight car, indicating that there is a problem. And of course, a wheel seal will also allow the intrusion of particulates and water, which will lead to eventual failure.
Thank you. And if I could have just a few more seconds, you held up the gauge. Could you hold that up again, please? The tool that you use?
Yes, there's two. There's a flange gauge, which is this one,
Mm-hmm.
and there is a high flange gauge in rim thickness, which is this one. These are highly important because if the flange is too thin, it could break off the wheel. It could potentially go down the wrong side of a switch that it's not intended for. Or if the flange is too high, it could ride up on the frog of a switch and go underground that way. Or if the rim is too thin, the wheel could actually shatter.
And the train crew, when they perform an Appendix D inspection, do they use those tools, and are they trained on how to use them?
The answer to that question is no.
Thank you, Mr. Cox. I turn the questioning over to Ms. Lamb.
Excuse me, I was just wondering, Chair Hammond, can the other panelists follow up on a question, or?
That's up to Dr. Garcia.